Greetings programs, this is TRON FAQ again with the third part of the tutorial where I'm finally going to tell you how to create that Derez map that I've been talking about for the last two parts. So what we're going to be doing in this tutorial is taking our light cycle map that we created in the previous tutorial and modifying it and turning it into a Derez or Team Derez map. So you'll have to have watched the previous tutorial in order to understand what we're doing and in order to follow along in this tutorial. Before we continue, there are three things I wanted to mention. First of all, in the last tutorial I forgot to mention the fact that you will probably want to add more than one spectator object. I only added one, but actually you should add more than that, because otherwise when players spawn in before they start playing, they'll only appear at that one point where they're observing the game happening below. If you add more than one spectator object, that way the players will appear at several points throughout the map and be able to look down and observe. And if they hit the space bar, they'll be able to move between those points. Secondly, in the last part, when I went to the world info menu item, and I told you about using ambient light, I used the values 256 for the RGB components of the light, and I realized that 256 is not a valid value. The values range from 0 to 255, so for your ambient light, if you choose to use it, you can use anywhere from 0 to 255 for the red, green, and blue values. But as I said, ambient lighting is not a good way to light your map in general, so I'm just going to delete this and I'm not going to use this type of lighting in my map for the example. Finally, in the last tutorial when I was telling you about the world properties object and adding a music control file to it, it seems that I picked the wrong one. Some of the music control files don't seem to work in your map, and I managed to pick one of them. So what I've done is I've changed the music control file to a different one, and this time there will be music in the map. When I compile and test it, it will work this time. So when you choose your music control file, make sure you choose one that works. Choose it, and when you compile and test, make sure that you can hear music. If you don't, you've chosen a music control file that doesn't work in your map, and you'll have to choose a different one. Now, with those things out of the way, let's move on to converting our light cycle map into a Derez or Deathmatch map. So what I'll do now is I'll move to the Nodes tab, and I'm going to delete the objects that aren't usable, that won't do us any good in a Derez map. So I'm going to check off the light cycle slow zone here and delete that by hitting the delete key on the keyboard. So now that's gone. Do the same thing with the light cycle speed zone, delete that. And now I'll delete the speed zone plane brush and also the slow zone plane brush by checking it off and hitting delete. And finally, I'm going to check off the spectator object and hit delete, because you can't use that in a Derez map either. So now that's gone. So now what we're going to do is we're going to modify the remaining objects so that they'll work in a Derez map. I am going to check off the game start point now here in the Nodes pane, and I'm going to click the marker to selection button, which will move the marker to the game start point. And now in the camera view, I'm going to hold down the O key to rotate, to move the camera around. I'm going to hold down the I key and move the mouse, so I'll move over to the object and rotate again. So now we're going to hit the delete key, which will delete the game start point. And now what I've done is the marker is in the place where the game start point was. So now when I add a new object, it will appear in the same place as the game start point. So I'm going to go to Add, Object, and now instead of a game start point, we're going to add an arena start point instead. Now, you would think you would be able to use a game start point, because in the properties of the game start point, there's a selection you can choose to change the type to Multiplayer Deathmatch. So you would think that a game start point would work, right? But no, it's not that simple. Instead, in Derez maps, you have to use arena start points for the spawn points instead of game start point. An arena start point is originally was actually meant for the disc arena maps, but as it turns out, you also have to use them in Derez maps. Why? You'll have to ask Touchdown Entertainment that did the Derez update for the TRON 2.0 game. I take it that they did it this way for probably the simple reason that it must have been easier to program the update this way to use arena start points instead of game start points. Go figure. If you don't use arena start points and use game start points in your Derez map instead, you'll have problems. You'll have problems when you spawn in, and sometimes you'll just sort of blow up or instantly derez when you appear, or you'll fall through the floor. Strange things will happen, so don't use game start points. Use arena start points instead on your Derez map. So we've selected an arena start point and click OK, and now we have an arena start point in our map instead of a game start point. And remember, for a Derez or Team Derez map, you actually need 16 of these, 16 arena start points spaced out, and not just one. I'm only putting in one because this is just a simple example. So now we'll go to the properties of the arena start point, and I'm going to go over here to the top view and zoom in on it. There it is, zoom in. Now I'm going to click the rotation button and use the yaw slider to rotate the arena start point, because once again we want the player to face inward toward the center of the map, otherwise he'll be facing the side. That blue line represents the direction in which the player will be facing when they spawn in. So I'm moving the blue line to face the center of the map, and in order to do that, we need the blue line to point inward, and we need the degrees at 270 degrees for the yaw. And that's that. So we'll click OK, and we're done. And that's all we need to do for the arena start point. We don't need to change any of the properties. We can just leave them alone as they are. So now I'll go to the Nodes tab here, and I'm going to rename the arena start point, and I'm just going to change it to arena start point 1 instead of 0, because it's more logical that way. And remember, you need 16, so it'll be arena start point 1 through 16 when you add them. So now we're going to check the light cycle missile power up here in the Nodes pane. Click the marker to selection button to move to it, and we'll use the camera again to move over to that power up. And we're going to hit the delete key to get rid of it. Right click, go to add, object, and this time we're going to choose, instead of light cycle power up, we're going to choose Deathmatch power up. We'll check that, click OK. So now the Deathmatch power up has appeared in the same place as where the light cycle power up was, because I moved the marker to the selection. So now it's appeared in the same spot. So we'll go to the properties of this Deathmatch power up, and we're going to change it to the cluster disk. So we'll click on cluster in the type drop down menu here, OK. And for the respawn time, we're going to adjust this field. We're going to drop it down to 5 seconds so that the cluster will respawn, reappear quickly, and won't take so long. OK, that's it for the properties of the Deathmatch power-ups. We'll go back to the Nodes tab here, and we'll click on the Deathmatch power-up a couple of times, and we're going to rename it into what it is. So we'll change the name to Cluster. So now we know it's a cluster power-up. Now we're going to check off the shield power-up. Click marker to selection. Move over to it in the camera view. Hit the delete key to get rid of it. Right click, go to add, object. Scroll down until we see Deathmatch power up. Click OK. Now we've added another Deathmatch power up. Go to the properties of the power up. And for this one, we're going to change it into a power download. A power download is one of those glowing globes that rotates, and there's three kinds. There's the health download, which is red and gives you health. Then there's the energy download, which is green and gives you energy. And then finally there's the power download, which is blue, which gives you both health and energy. So we'll choose power download. Okay. And again, we're going to change the respawn time to 5 seconds. Okay, that's done. So now we go back to the Nodes tab here, and we're going to rename this one to what it is. and this is a power download. Now, when I converted these power-ups into deathmatch power-ups, what I could have done is the same as in the last tutorial where I went to the properties, and then for the power-up property here, I could change it into a deathmatch power-up from a lifecycle power-up, but I wanted to demonstrate how to delete objects, so I highlighted the objects here in the nodes pane and hit the delete key and showed you how you could delete objects if you wanted. And if you ever make a mistake, what you can do is go to the edit menu here and choose undo to undo the last thing you did, or you can hit Control Z, hold down the Control Z and then hit Z, and it'll undo the last action you did if you make a mistake. So that's it. That's all you needed to do to convert this lifecycle map into a deathmatch map. So now what we're going to do is we're going to save it again quick before data crashes or something, right? We'll go to File, Save World As. We'll choose TBW again, Tron Binary World, because it loads faster into de-edit. And we'll call this map Test 2, let's say. And save it. And wait. And okay, now we're safe. We saved the map and we're done. So now, of course, once again we need to compile the map, so we'll go to the Process World button up here, click it, and now I explained the options here in the last tutorial, and we're not going to change anything from last time. We're just going to leave it the way it is. This is exactly what we need. So we'll just click Process here, and now our map is compiling, and it's done. We've finished compiling our map. So we'll click Close. And now, just like last time, we're not going to use the de-edit run world option here to test our map, because again, it doesn't do a good job of testing your map in the proper mode. You're going to end up playing the map in single player mode, which is not the same thing. You won't be able to test it properly, so we're not going to use that. Instead, what we're going to do is go into the worlds folder here, and we're going to take our map, our compiled map, the .dat, the DAT file, and we're going to copy it. We're going to move up a couple of levels, and we're going into the custom folder that I've created here in the TRON 2.0 game directory. Go in there. We're going to go into another folder that I've created called Worlds. Going to go in there. And now I've created yet another folder called Retail Multiplayer, one word, Retail Multiplayer. We're going to go into that one. And then once again, there's yet another folder within Retail Multiplayer called Deathmatch, one word, Deathmatch. We'll go into this folder now. Now finally in here, we're going to paste our DAT file, our map. And now that we've pasted it in here, we'll be able to test our map in the TRON 2.0 game by hosting it, and then it will be available as a map to choose from the map selection feature. Now, a Derez or a deathmatch map can be used in both the normal Derez and Team Derez modes. There's nothing special you have to do to your map to make it work in both modes. You just compile your map, and then when you go to play in TRON 2.0, when you go to host it, you just choose either Derez or Team Derez mode when you host it, and that's what determines whether or not the map will be played as a Derez or Team Derez map. There's nothing special that you have to do in de-edit in order to make your map Derez or Team Derez. By default, your map is going to work in both modes. There's nothing special that you need to do. Okay, now one final thing before we go and test our map. If you look here in this folder, you'll see that I've got another file here called testinfo.txt. Now what I did is I went, let's go back up to our TRON 2.0 game directory. And I'll go in the game folder here. Now I'll go in the worlds folder, and I'll go to Retail Multiplayer, and then Deathmatch. And then here, if you look, you'll see the DAT files from the game, the maps from the game, and they also have these text files associated with them called info text files here. Like for example, you've got dm-01 dat, and then you've got another file here called dm-01 info.text. What I did is I highlighted one of these here. It doesn't matter which one, you can pick any of them, and then choose copy, and then move back up to the TRON 2.0 game directory. Then go into the custom folder here, and worlds, and retail multiplayer, and deathmatch, and then you would paste that file here. You'd paste it, and you would rename it to, instead of say dm-01 info, you would rename it to test info so that it matches the name of your map. And actually I have to rename this to test 2 info to match. So I'm going to change it now to test 2 info. There we go. So now this text file matches the name of the map with the word info attached onto the end of it. So we've got test2 here, and here we've got test2 info.text, and you can't put anything in between test2 and info, or the name of your map and info. It has to come directly behind the name of the map. No underscore, no nothing, just info tacked on to the end of the name of your map. So now I'm going to click on the text file here, and it's going to open it up. It's going to load it in a text editor of mine. And there we go. And now inside this text folder, the purpose of this file, inside this text file, the purpose of the file is to define what weapon primitives and subroutines the player will have when he spawns into your Derez map. This file is used by the server that hosts the map to determine what weapon primitives and subroutines the player should get when they spawn into the map. Now there are some entries in here that you shouldn't change. You shouldn't touch them when you edit the info file. Don't change the max team size, leave that alone. Don't change the system memory string here, leave that alone. And for num random subs, don't change that either, because I've already tried changing this. I've tried seeing what it does, if it works, but it doesn't seem to work. If you change this, it will just prevent you from getting any weapons or subroutines when you spawn in. I guess this was the feature that Monolith intended to use but didn't get around to finishing, and they just left it disabled. So don't mess with this part either, or else you're not going to be able to get any weapons or subroutines when you spawn in. Just leave it at 0 here. So we'll start with the easiest part first here in the info file. For the weapon primitives, so that you automatically get them when you spawn in, you have these lines here. You've got the first one here called default prim for primitive 0 equals quote disk quote. So that gives you a disk when you spawn into the map. And then we've got another line here called default prim 1 equals rod. So that gives you the rod primitive when you spawn into the Derez map. And then default prim 2 here equals quote ball quote. So you get the ball primitive when you spawn in. And default prim 3 equals quote mesh quote. So this gives you the blaster or mesh primitive when you spawn in. So that takes care of the weapon primitives that you get when you spawn in. Now we're going to go here to the other section with the subroutines, and as you can see, I've put in a whole bunch of subroutines, some of the ones that you would probably want to use in your Derez map. In fact, if you want, you can use any subroutine from the single player game in Derez mode. You can use any one of them, but I'm just going to pick the most popular ones and add them here to this text file. So now here for default sub 0, I've got equals quote sequencer. So that's the sequencer subroutine that improves your disk primitive so that you're able to throw the disk more than once, have more than one disk in the air at the same time. And I'm putting it at gold level. Now I've heard stories, I don't know how much truth there is to it because I haven't tested it, but I've heard stories that if you don't use gold in your Derez map, it can cause problems. Your map can start acting funny. Again, I don't know how much truth there is to that. I'd have to test it. So I just always put the subroutine level at gold by default. In other words, the most effective level for the subroutine. If you want, you can try changing it to beta or alpha and see what happens. I honestly don't know. I haven't tried. Again, I've heard rumors that it causes problems, but at any rate, I'm just going to leave it at gold, and that's probably what you want to do anyways, because when you're fighting in Derez mode, you want the the most effective subroutines anyways, right, to do the most damage. So I'm just going to leave it at gold. Now here for default sub 1 equals quote, and I put in cluster, so that gives you the cluster disk, and again it's a gold level quote. So now I'm going to be getting the cluster disk when I spawn in, and remember to put a space between the subroutine name and the level you want it at. And then for default sub 2 equals quote suffusion, so that's the equivalent, the digital equivalent or TRON equivalent here of a shotgun at gold level quote. And default sub 3 is I guess it's supposed to be laughing out loud, the sniper gun, in other words, at gold level. And default sub 4 equals quote ball underscore launcher space goal, so that will give you the ball launcher, which is one step above the ball primitive. It's that thing that wraps around your arm and fires off one shot of the ball. And one thing I want to mention before I continue is that it doesn't matter what case you use for the name of the subroutine, or for that matter for anything, even in Dedit, when you're typing in commands or anything like that, you don't have to worry about it being the right case. Dedit is not, and the game is not case sensitive. You can use uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter, just as long as you get all the letters correct. So it can be, lowercase b for ball underscore launcher, and it'll still work, it doesn't matter. Okay, now for default sub 5, I've got drunken underscore dims, so that gives you the drunken dim subroutine where it fires off multiple shots at once. It's the most powerful form of the ball. And then for default sub 6, I've got equals energy claw. Now, when Touchdown Entertainment did the Derez update, they didn't put in proper support for the energy claw. So it'll kind of work, like you'll be able to use it. It'll be in your inventory when you spawn in, and you'll be able to use it. But when other players see you, when you're using energy claw, it won't appear properly. And the same goes for the rod primitive, for that matter. Touchdown didn't put that in either. So when you use the rod primitive or the energy claw, what will happen is you'll see either a ball or a disc stuck in the wrist of the player. When you look at them running around, you'll see this thing stuck in their arm. And that means they're either using the rod primitive or the energy claw if someone chooses to put this subroutine into the info text file. So the weapons are usable, but they won't appear properly on the player when you see them running around. You won't see the actual proper weapon in their hand, which is stupid and unfortunate, but it looks like Touchdown couldn't be bothered to put in the weapon models properly for these. So because of that, we're stuck with these stupid looking things stuck in people's wrists when they try to use those weapons. Okay, so for the next one, it's default sub 7, which is the prankster bit, prankster underscore bit. So that gives you the prankster bit when you spawn in. Default sub 8 equals YAMP, one word, YAMP gold. So it's a gold level, the YAMP, so you'll be able to jump the highest. Default sub 9 is shield underscore prism, and what the shield prism is the power block subroutine. This is a different name for that, for power block. This adds power block when you spawn in. Default sub 10 equals corrode, which is that power up that allows you to continue damaging players after you hit them. There's this green sort of haze or glow around them that continues to damage after you hit. For default sub 11, it equals megahertz, which improves or increases the damage when you hit someone. Default sub 12 equals profiler, which is what lets you, when you put your cursor on another player in Derez, it lets you see how they're doing, what their health is, and their armor, and what subroutine they're using at that moment, what weapon. Default sub 13 equals triangulate, which improves the laughing out loud and also lets you actually zoom in using other weapons. You can zoom in on the player and try to snipe them or hit them from a distance. And default sub 14 equals primitive underscore charge. So this also improves the damage that you deal out when you fire a weapon at somebody. Default sub 15 equals submask gold, and the submask is the helmet armor that you will get when you spawn in if you use this. Default sub 16 equals truncate underscore plate gold. So that's the chest armor. Default sub 17 equals peripheral underscore seal. So that's the armor that goes on the arms. Default sub 18 equals support safeguard. That's the boots, I guess you could say, yep. Or no, sorry, that's actually the leg armor. Right, that's the leg armor, support safeguard. And default sub 19 base underscore damping, that's the boots. That's the boot armor that you get. And finally, for default sub 20, I set that to viral underscore shield. So when someone uses a ball type weapon on you, along with corrode, for example, the viral shield will help to prevent you from becoming infected and get damage. So those are the most common or popular subroutines you would probably want to add to a Derez or Team Derez map. You could add other ones as well, but these are probably the ones you would want to use. So you can either use all of them, like I've done. I've just done it for this example to show that you can use all of them if you want, or you can pick and choose which ones you want and just add a few, and just make sure that you use the correct numbering scheme here from 0, increasing 1 by 1 as you add each one. And the same goes for the primitives. Start with the number 0. So, and then you would just, whatever you've done to this file, once you've edited it and added what you want, you'd hit save, and again make sure that it's the name of your map with the word info tacked on to the end of it, .text. You'd save it. You'd make sure it's in the same folder here, this Deathmatch folder, as your map. And now when you go to test the map, you'll find that these subroutines will be added to your inventory when you spawn in. Okay, so now let's go test our map.
Begin.